Hi there, and welcome to the Mindful Marathon podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Quirk, a run coach and pediatrician. Mindful Marathon is all about helping runners of all types to run their own race. Whether you are a seasoned runner or you're just getting started, I want to let you know that you're welcome here and that you're in the right place. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Marathon podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I have with me Dr. Siri Chand Khalsa. She is an internal medicine physician and board certified not only in internal medicine, but in integrative medicine, lifestyle medicine, and hospice and palliative medicine. And she is also a yoga instructor, a Reiki master, and she participated in a 2-year full-time program on Ayurveda at the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque in India. And I am so excited to welcome her to the show and learn about her story. So Dr. Siri Chand, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a delight and wonderful to reconnect our conversation threads and in these interesting times.
Yes, definitely. So maybe as a place to start, could you tell us a little bit about your journey into medicine and how you got interested in all of these different facets of medicine? I just want to hear a little bit about your story before we talk about anything related to running.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things we think about in the integrative community is sort of the idea that each person's healing journey, each person's running journey, each person's process to awaken and enliven themselves is just a bit different. It's never the same river twice, as the Greek philosophers said. And so you could say I had a little bit of an awakening in my pre-med days. I had come from a very competitive science high school, magnet science high school that unbelievably burns out 16-year-olds. So, they're competing for Ivies, and it's a very competitive school in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. And so when I arrived to college, I had always had that sense I wanted to be in medicine or work with people in their healing journeys. But I began to understand that there was more in the model than what was currently available or being taught. And, the rationale and reasons for that are quite complicated and paradigms and belief systems. But ultimately, for me, what I realized was that the way that the current medical model works is that there's an implicit belief and value of how someone cares for themselves, but there's not a deep empowerment model for us as clinicians to have, hey, do this. And it's certainly not built into our visits because of the constraints of time and how finances run practices. So along the way, I just started to continue to pick up skills that I felt like could both prevent health, return people to health, and maintain health, and so prevent disease, I mean. So that was what really prompted sort of a perpetual exploration. I'm still learning from Tai Chi to yoga to journaling to creativity to artistic expressions to movement to somatic work to Reiki, which is sort of an energy medicine modality, to whole person healing systems like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. What I realized is that I just expanded my circle. I never left the evidence base that was so valuable, and I never left the skill set that allowed me to meet an acute moment, just like you, right? You
Mhm.
had that training background that said, if something extreme happens, I can step in. And I think this is a little bit of the disconnect that's happening in sort of the wellness world that's pushing for certain perspectives is that they really haven't been as present with people who are critically ill. And the corollary to that is that because we have so much training in high acuity, we're a little less sensitive to the worried well, as we call them, who really want to optimize health. So there's been this kind of disconnect that I think I'm sort of uniquely aware of both perspectives.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how what brought me to sort of the modern moment. But I have been unfortunately dealing with a pretty significant case of complications from COVID, which I actually got 5 years about to the date today.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was early February of 2020, right as the pandemic was starting, and no one really knew what was happening.
Mhm.
And I developed a bilateral pneumonia with effusions and just they didn't even have a test at that point. You had to have traveled international. So I'm not even sure how I got it, but I'm nearly positive that's what it was because I was so sick and I really haven't been the same since.
Yeah.
And I've had to navigate sort of with compassion this new body that I have.
Yeah, yeah. Now wow, I have so many things I want to ask you, but before the COVID, I mean, that was really early on in the pandemic, before perhaps we even were in the pandemic in the United States anyway. But before that, were you a regular runner? I don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that.
no, I wasn't. I did train extensively when I was younger,
Hmm.
and I would say I was a fast dog walker. So I
Okay,
had
okay.
sort of a routine that, we have a wire fox terrier who is a fierce investigator and loves a brisk pace, but
Yes.
no, not a runner.
Yeah. Well, so tell us a little bit about, I think th this is important for people to hear because all of us, whether we are regular runners or not, I think all of us have had to deal with different health situations that have come up along the way, whether, because of overtraining and getting a stress injury or an illness that was unplanned, cancer treatment that cropped up. Like all of us have stories like this, and I think how we handle that information when we first get it and what we do with it as we move on and now 5 years into it, I would love to hear, kind of the stages maybe that you went through and how you navigate things now because you're not necessarily on the other side of that, whatever that means.
Right. I think, one of the things and I would correlate this to some extent with aging, right? I trained as a geriatrician at Mayo and then worked in hospice for years. So I'm used to a little bit different scope of practice than you, but being able to see people through the arc of their life and in the advanced progression of the changes the body goes through before we leave this form into who knows, whatever belief system a person has to what's next. But along the way, I really started to appreciate, the body changes in ways that sometimes we don't want it to change. Specifically, if you have a debilitating neurologic injury or you have a chronic disease, autoimmune disease, these things come up. So so it's really tricky to kind of think about how all of that comes together. And I I began in my career when I still had pretty good health, understanding that self-compassion was probably part of the inquiry. And self-compassion is sort of listening to the critical or shaming or judging or what if or could it have been thoughts and offering a lens of awareness first. Oh, there are those thoughts. I'm thinking, I wish I had this body I had when I was younger. I wish I had the body before I was sick. I wish I'd never had cancer. I wish I'd never injured my knee. I wish I hadn't done that extra 3 miles because it tore up my ACL and I tripped and fell on the ice, right? That litany of stories that on thoughts that our brain is delivering to us. First thing is to just notice them. At least that was my experience. And then the second step was to sort of say, does this thought serve an outcome or a general direction I want my feelings to move towards? And then I had to say, no, probably not, but that thought is still there. It's not like you just snap your finger and this thought disappears. But then you can say, sometimes I would even say to myself, that's weird, just as a way to break the neurobiology, the
Hmm.
synapses, the cycling thoughts. And then I had to sort of say, what's working? What's working? What is enjoyable still about the body that I have?
Hmm.
And I think working in hospice really did give me the ability to do that because I certainly saw a complex array of how bad it can get. And it's very humbling to register like, okay, this is still pretty okay. Like I'm ambulatory, I'm still freely mobile. And it's not to say that people who lose some of that functional still don't have meaning, but each person has their own journey and arc with significant changes in their functional status. So there's no one way it's going to be. Like another person might say, well, I don't mind what's happened. I'm a very accepting person. And another person might fight it tooth and nail the whole way through. So surrendering, accepting, self-compassion, those were big pieces. But it took me about 18 months because I fought it. And I would try to exert myself and go out and do things. And then I would have these flares. And they're just starting to understand sort of maybe the mitochondrial impact of COVID or why there's this post-exertional fatigue that's so severe for people with long
Mhm.
COVID. The mechanism of that is not entirely well understood. Is it inability to replenish neuromuscular messengers? We don't really know. Like, but it's in the literature that it's fairly consistently occurring where you're like, oh my gosh, I want to be in bed for 3 days. And the problem is when you're in bed for 3 days, by about day three, there's sort of this gravity that you want to just stay in bed. But by that point, it's a really deleterious decision to stay in bed. You have to make this very conscious effort to say, I'm going to get up out of bed. And this is something I think that is a little bit of a tricky conversation because people want to be given the I don't know if freedom is the right word, but permission to exist as they do with however their body has changed.
Mhm.
And at the same time, as clinicians, we want to see people sort of leaning into solutions. And this staying in bed piece with the post-COVID fatigue is a very interesting juxtaposition because you feel like you won't have energy if you get up. You feel like you won't be able to go. But when you do get up, at least for me, I could go. But if I stayed in bed, it would just sort of, you would just sink a little bit more and more into the fatigue picture. So
Yeah.
there were some circumstances where I had to just be like, all right, I'm so exhausted, but I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to stand. I'm going to walk. I'm going to and your mind is telling you you're very tired, even if physiologically you may have all the reserves you need to be able to do it.
Yeah. Have you or have has science identified any triggers for these sort of like periods of time? Because I've heard this, repeated by friends, colleagues who have had COVID and have long COVID symptoms. And I'm not sure if anyone necessarily knows like a trigger. And so it's very hard as a coach and with people who want to get back to regular physical activity, whether that is walking or running or swimming, but how to, we pay attention to so much already, nutrition and sleep and hydration and preventing other illnesses and all of these things. But how is there anything we can identify as triggers, or is it sort of chalked up to added stress, but we don't know what that is?
Well, I think the fascinating thing about it is that I think these are just my opinions. And of course, I am not, um, to my credit or not, I have not been nose to the literature, if that makes sense. Like I have
Yeah,
not been in there searching for every paper, every
yeah.
theory. But what I will say, and this would just be anecdotally to me, that three things seem to really set it off. And for me, it was very interesting diet, but not like particular macro combos, particular foods.
Oh,
So for me, hot, spicy foods set off a histamine response.
yeah.
And histamine is a mediator in some of these inflammatory and the MCAS kind of picture with the dysautonomia and the fatigue. So hot, spicy food and really acidic food. Like I love fermented food. It's like it could be I couldn't eat anything worse for myself at this particular junction in time. I'm like guaranteed a flare if I eat like homemade sauerkraut. I still do it. Sometimes I still just like knowingly dive in, but hot, spicy, like a really hot, spicy salsa, the next day I've got all my symptoms
Wow.
just on the loose. The second, and there is like physiology for that, that's through these histamine pathways. And that's why people, and again, very complicated neurologic mechanisms. Like, why do people like hot sauce? It activates certain pathways through other messengers, if you will. The second thing for me, and this one is probably the hardest part, and I recently, as you know, I have a podcast as well, and I recently had a wonderful guest on the podcast who is really a sleep expert, and I loved our conversation about the non-restorative sleep that's a major component of long COVID. So there's this also, so COVID has these funny like cycles within the psyche, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So you're already not really in the life you imagined. And then you get a little bit of early morning awakening, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and your mind is going, I don't like this life anymore, right? I'm bummed we can't do this or that. Why are you able to sleep through the night? You used to be able to sleep. The mind is active the moment the eyes are open.
Mhm.
And these, and then you don't sleep well. And then you're tired and cranky, and the thoughts are more prominent. And it becomes this really non-restorative sleep cycle. And so and I would encourage, maybe you can link to that podcast because she
Yeah.
was so wonderful in how she explained the mechanism. And I don't want to do it injustice, but basically there's some theory behind this poor restorative sleep. Even if you think you're sleeping well, there may also be technical architecture of REM sleep and stages of sleep that have been negatively impacted by COVID that need really concrete sort of interventions.
Mhm.
Um, and then the third is, I think a lot of people who have, this may be very unpopular, so I say this with a grain of salt. I think a lot of people who have long COVID have some degree of commingling trauma, anxiety, or depression. And the COVID sort of attenuates what might have been well managed or latent through lifestyle choices. And so then you're in this sort of self-defeating cycle, and your internal voice is not your friend. And that actually creates quite a rise in cortisol and the fight or flight mechanisms that also seem to activate these neuroinflammatory and immunologic mechanisms that if long COVID is an autoimmune phenomena or some variation therein, these low-grade stress, which is suddenly now not well managed because your coping mechanisms of friendships, community, exercise, being able to care for yourself food-wise, your budget may have changed because you aren't working. So it's actually very, very complicated and I always say like, the stressors of it are like little lines in the mason jar, right? Line one, two, three, four, five, six. And as you get to line eight, this is where symptoms are. If
Yeah.
you can empty the bottle and keep it below eight. And so we all have, I mean, there's existential dread that exists for most people alive right now. I mean, the world that we live in and our awareness of the atrocities because of social media and the way in which information is shared and the impacts to our neurophysiology and dopamine, it is a little bit like most people have some degree of internal angst and existential dread. And
Mhm.
maybe some people are happy right now, but I can't imagine it. But, there's like,
Yeah.
and not to say that people can't be happy in the midst of things that are inherently chaotic or discordant. It's more just an appreciation that being alive may not just be about being happy. There's a whole continuum of experiences that we have. And so I hope that helps round out your how
Mhm.
you see it, but that's how it's been my lived experience. And sometimes you have to get help in like multiple different buckets. You need to have a good relationship with a counselor or a therapist, and that might be enough. Other people need some sort of pharmacologic or botanical support. Some people can do well with mindfulness or yoga, gentle yin practices. Some people can get on a reclining bike. They
Mhm.
can't run anymore, but they can do the reclining bike. So you have to just kind of like meet each person in their unique version of long COVID. But I'll tell you, I'm no one's faking it. Like it's not, I would love to have my previous body back. Like
Yeah.
I am like the last few weeks I've had this weird swelling in my face burning ears and no one has a clue what that's from. And I'm like, all right, well, it's like being at, Disney World, the ride where you go through all the nations. I forget the name of that. Like long
Yeah.
COVID has this like array of random symptoms and some linger and some go away. And you're like, oh, okay, we're in the red hot ears for no reason and swollen face for no reason. And that's the part of the ride we're in. And like 6 months from now, I could be like, oh, I've got this weird joint deformity. It has been so random that, and I wouldn't attribute these to natural aging. I just wouldn't. Like these
Mm.
are,
Yeah.
I saw patients for years and I never had someone come in and say, I've got a balloon hot red face with burning ears. And then like, I'd be like, oh, okay, something's wrong here, like some
Yeah.
sort of physiologic mechanism. But a lot of it has to do with auto-regulation of capillaries and things of that nature. So
Mm.
the autonomic nervous system really doesn't do its job properly anymore. So
Yep.
then you have just these kind of like it's like popcorn or
Mm.
fireworks inside, and you're like, why? Go, gosh, why? Please
I
stop.
I love your the illustration with the mason jar. For everybody listening, we're on Zoom, so I could see it, but and you can watch the video on YouTube, but that makes a lot of sense with the mason jar and the levels and how most of us right now, I mean, even if we are feeling healthy and quite good about most things, I think most of us are probably have that filled up at least to line one or two with the
Yeah,
current
yeah,
goings on
absolutely,
in the world. It's
absolutely. And
impossible not to.
right, and just interference of sleep if you're in medical fields or you have a stressful event from a family member or you just got out of your holiday eating sprint and now here's the Super Bowl and Valentine's Day just around the corner and then it's going to be Labor Day and hot dogs, right? I mean, there's always going to be this like interference from what we know are the health promoting habits, but and I think, people used to ask me, they'd say, well, why aren't you better if you believe in integrative medicine and all these things? And I say, well, I could be maybe not here anymore. Like I got COVID 2 more times. So each time had its own severity. But I mean, I believe all the things that I've done have brought in more health than if not. And so I used to say that to patients, oh, I ate so healthy. How come I have this debilitating diagnosis now in cancer, autoimmune disease, etc.? And I'd always say, well, imagine what you can't see is that disease expression or the manner in which it has a grip on you could be on a scale of 1 to 10, it could be a 2 or it could be a 10. So, keep making those good choices because they are, I promise you, they're impacting recurrences, severity, or even potential for cure, depending on what you're dealing with. So, I think there's a sort of disconnect to the actual deep and residing value of stress reduction and lifestyle changes to preserving and maintaining health. I can't say that enough. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna yodel it from the top of the Swiss Alps and be like, Ricola. It's like, hello everyone. Health is not like pill. Health is your daily like program. And unfortunately, and I said this to someone recently, absolutely no one can live that for you. Like
So
maybe some of
true.
the modern technologies are going to give you regenerative qualities that like were previously unavailable unless you fasted or exercised or ate a certain particular way, but that'll be for the elite few. For the average person, in terms of what's going to be available both financially and just practically, lifestyle is always going to be one of your best avenues to promoting and reducing your disease burden.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. We'll shout it from the rooftops, and I'll the clips that I advertise for
Yay!
our podcast will be such.
Love it.
Yeah. And one thing too that I wanted to go back to um, is maybe how can we, this is a big question, but I'm going to try to make it simple.
Sure.
How can we be kind to ourselves in the moment, whether we are dealing with a chronic illness or even aging? And for my runners out there who are longing to run as fast as they could when they were in their 20s and 30s and can't hit those paces anymore. How can we be kind to ourselves just on the day to day?
Well, I think that one of the things, the important thing to just start off with right out of the bat is that it's a choice. It's actually a choice. It's not a default mechanism. And so the culture and the way in which you were raised often gives you a window to what you can expect is below the surface, meaning what is the unconscious terrain, subconscious terrain sorting out and delivering to you in those, whatever it is, 70 thoughts a minute or 1,000 thoughts a minute, that mind is just moving. But one of the things that, and I know you've heard this before, and perhaps your runners have heard this before, is that would you talk to yourself the way you're talking? Would you talk to a friend the way you're talking to yourself? And and when people are in that harsh, critical, judgmental voice, it's often maybe something that was introduced in the family system or educationally, and it may have only been said once. This is the funny thing about these critical voices, or you read it in an article. It just settles in, it drops in, and then there's frictionless action for it. It never meets any resistance. And so, first thing we want to do is just notice that. Would I say that what I just said to myself, to my dearest friend or to my child? Then you can sort of, I always like to say, try a different voice and say, I'm doing enough. I love this body. I'm grateful for this body. And even though those are not like immediate fixes, because this is like a groove of the mind, right? And sometimes to get to this place, we have to get unbusy. So the idle mind is actually useful, but right now our idle mind is spent scrolling. So I sometimes tell people get bored. Allow yourself to get bored every now and then, like really bored. Like, I'm on the sofa, I'm so bored. But in that boredom, because we're not natural meditators in our culture, is that you're allowing the systems to rest and reset. And these little pauses and stillness give a meditative quality, a metacognitive awareness to hear that voice the next time. Because sometimes we don't hear the voice, we just feel the feeling. So we might hear, "Oh, you're an awful runner because you skipped your routine and had fried chicken last night." And someone's like, "Oh, yeah, that's me. I'm awful. I'm off track." But allow for, you don't hear the dialogue, you just feel the feeling of shame. You feel the feeling of not enoughness. You feel the feeling of it's never going to get there. I'm never going to be what I want to be. You don't always, that not enoughness feeling isn't always that we're hearing all the thoughts. So those pauses give you space to hear the thoughts a little bit more. So I think this is sort of my my philosophy is that we have to have spaces of boredom and pause to hear the dialogue. If we don't hear it, we're a bit outnumbered, right? It's going to be really hard to unravel the outcomes of that voice constantly being just beneath the surface of our awareness. And so it's funny, well, if you slow down a little, even just in this moment, you can sometimes hear something that's like, for me, it's like my mom's voice. Why aren't you doctoring anymore? Like, mom, because I've been really sick. But, like I don't say that and I don't hear that. I more feel ashamed for not still being in a clinical practice or having the same level of income, which would solve a lot of problems that I have right now. So, oh, if only, then I feel shame, then I feel demoralized, and then I feel heavy and dense and unable to go do the changes and do the things. So, also, it's like a boundary as time goes by when a thought emerges and you're like, no, no, I don't believe you. Or no, that's not useful. Or that's weird. Why are you saying, brain, why are you saying that? And so having that boundary can be really useful.
Yeah. And I think most people, like you said, we're all moving so fast that we don't even recognize. Most people may not even recognize the feeling. So
Yeah.
to get, I mean, it's a multi-step process, but I think um I can certainly relate to slowing down, helping in all aspects of life, including running. And just the slowing down allows for more awareness. And I found like creativity emerged there where I didn't think I really had a very creative mind before. But even running and slowing down and tuning everything else out, I could finally hear myself.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't know if this is your experience, that can be a little uncomfortable because there may be things that need to change or shift or that are behaviors that aren't really in alignment with our values. And so I always tell people, don't think it's all going to be roses and
Mm,
unicorns when you
mhm.
slow down.
True.
Like there may be things that meet you there that are quite painfully uncomfortable. But moving through discomfort builds resilience and it creates the capacity to hold joy when you get there. And that's that's the secret sauce, right? Because we can grind indefinitely to goals. Like gosh knows clinicians can do that. We have developed the most profound muscle of delayed gratification that anyone on the planet has. I assume there's other professions where there's an even longer path to delayed gratification in terms of like career fulfillment and income and completion, but like it's not many, right? There's not many. So we want to have some boundaries with delayed gratification, even in training or even in working out or even in how we construct our daily routine
Mhm.
and be willing to celebrate and say, I arrived to my goal. Instead of just being like, oh man, I got a 7 minute mile. Okay, fool, why aren't you at a 4 minute mile? Like, you know, pause at the 7 minute mile and say, oh, I celebrate you. Great job. And
Mhm.
stick in that feeling, not just glaze through it. That's the
Yep.
other piece, right? We don't also celebrate our wins. We don't
Nope.
praise ourselves for what's going right. The brain is so quick to move to what's next or what didn't go right, getting there, or all the things.
Yep. For sure. I used to be a person who would finish the race and then have another race on the calendar as soon as it was done. Um,
Uh,
yeah, talk about. And I think that's why medical professionals are great marathoners because
yeah, we stick to it.
yeah, it takes so long to train for, but we are very persistent and consistent.
Yes. And these aren't necessarily our faults, right? Because
No.
this is a beautiful thing to run a marathon, but we want to like interject these other pieces along the way that include things like joy and just saying, no, no, I'm not planning my next race until I've celebrated this win
Mhm.
and I figured out what's left for me that, resilience wise, time wise, and is this wise to do this next step here? And COVID really taught me that because I used to just sort of move from one thing to the next, rapid fire, and I literally cannot anymore. I often require several days after a big event or something I've done supporting others or teaching. I need like a good week sometimes, even if I've done a big presentation, or sometimes I've been doing some catering, cooking, like whole food, plant-based educational catering, is whole thing into some events. And I need like a week after a busy event. And I don't want to just hop on the calendar and be like, that's awesome. This income came in and these people were positively impacted. And you you've shined your light. And then it's like, okay, when do we do that again? No, I cannot do that. And I've gotten much better at calendaring as well. I used to just kind of wing it. I'd be like, sure, I can just add me to the schedule. I'll do it. And then now I'm like, better slow down, better
Yeah.
be clear, better not overschedule. And so, but then you can have those pauses and moments of celebration.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great. I love I love all of this, and I think there are so many things we can pull out for really just for our day to day, whether we are a runner or not. But I mean, certainly the world needs to slow down and take a pause right now and take a breath. So if nothing else, we're doing that today.
Yes, and when you do that, extend your exhale because it'll bring your parasympathetic online, right? So inhale two, exhale four. These are wonderful theories from Ayurvedic and yogic technology that's been borne out in the modern, pulmonary literature, basically,
Yeah.
that the movement of the diaphragm, full belly breaths, actually helps us bring that relax nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, to be active and takes us out of movement and fight flight. And if we're using just these little peripheral lung, accessory muscles and we're, just sort of not ever exhaling, we're only just inhaling, right? Which is so common when stress and tension and chaos are rising. We're just like,
We're just hyperventilating.
we're just, yeah, hyperventilating, exactly. But when we and I tell people you can even do a big ah with it. So you inhale and then ah, just that big sigh, let it come out. The body has a natural desire to move towards balance all the time. Like there's no question. The body is always wanting to make movements to balance and healing, even when it's a bit confused about what it needs to be doing, or even when we're in those very, very last stages of life. There's still a certain particular rhythm that the body is attempting to calibrate to, and breath is one of the primary conscious controls that we have within that. And people
Yeah.
forget that. Yeah, and I'm sure as runners, you think so much about the breath and nose breathing, mouth breathing, inhale, exhale becomes very rhythmic, the breath. And I think James Nestor has a new book out or newish book out called Breath. Let me look that up really quick.
Yeah, I can
It's
drop
about
it
all
in the
the
notes.
yeah, it's all the literature on breath and the impact to health. He did a deep dive. Um, it's called Breath. I think it's just called Breath.
Oh, I
It's
love it.
something
I
like,
love it.
yeah, it's a New York Times bestseller. It's called The New Science of a Lost Art. It's called Breath. And so for the runners in your group who want to see this deepening connection between our psyche and our nervous systems and the breath and rhythms of breath, this would be probably a great read.
Yes, it would. I will put it on our reading list for next
Yeah.
month.
Oh, fun. Yeah, that would be a good one.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, can you please tell everybody where they can find you and also about your podcast?
Yeah, actually, I love it. Thank you so much for having me. So you can find me online, spelled out Dr. Doctor, Siri Chand, Sirichand. And I have a podcast called Roots of Healing, Routes, little play on words. And I also curate a community for women in medicine, just sort of leaning into all the principles actually we've been talking about called Vishuddha, and that is the throat chakra. So it's about our authentic expression.
Love it. And I will leave all those links below for everybody to find, and including the book as well. So thank you so much for joining us and for this it was a really interesting and much needed discussion today.
I hear you. And thank you so much. And delight to get to spend time with you again.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the podcast so that we can reach and encourage others to tie on their sneakers and join us out there on a run. See you next time.